a lot of people don't really understand what you guys are talking about. They're saying, I went to the diner with my family. It was a husband, a wife, and 3 kids. And the dad had a steak, and the wife had some farm-raised salmon, and one kid had a chicken sandwich, and one had a cheeseburger, and the youngest one had an egg omelet. And they sat in a very nice diner in comfortable booths. The waitress was delightful. They brought the food out. It tasted great. They laughed and joked with the waitress. They tipped her. They paid at the counter. They bumped into some friends. They left. It was a wonderful day. What in the world? How are you talking about oceans, forests, deserts, species extinction, climate change, water shortage, food shortages? How are you getting all those things from a simple, friendly dinner where people ordered some food on a plate? How in the world? They didn't go and chop down a tree or like what? How are you making this connection that this food has something to do with all of these concerns that you're calling tipping points and problems?
Well, they did chop down a tree. You know, people just have to recognize that, you know, just like people eat, you know, kids eat bacon and they don't realize it's pig, right? So you can go through life not knowing that a bacon came from a living being, but of course, most children don't know what bacon is. And then at some age, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, they realize it, and usually they keep eating the bacon. Well, similarly, we can continue to eat, you know, burgers and chicken and fish and not realize that we're chopping down forests and degrading the land and destroying the oceans in order to do it, or we can realize it. So just like a child has to realize that bacon is a pig, adults have to realize that their delightful meal at the diner is actually highly destructive. And they can have a delightful meal at a vegan diner that'll be healthy. So that's the transition we have to make.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, though, real quickly, if I can jump in for a second, Glenn, what Stephen's asking, though, is that the word you're using is realize. So we need to start looking at effective ways to move it instead of empirically saying that we have to realize. Like, I think what Stephen's getting at is that how do you make them realize? So right, there has to be an education. Like we educated our children. They knew what animals are and where food came from and what they saw in grocery stores when they were 3 years old. So there has to be a way that we introduce this educationally and find a way to do this into educational systems. Parents have to do it. Have them go see Cowspiracy. They have the parents go see Cowspiracy. Not think they're going to realize it when they sit in a diner, but we have to make things like that more accessible and make sure that we, really, it was 7 years ago. The previous dietary guidelines had the scientific advisory committee gave their guidelines to, and this is for the United States food, the dietary guidelines that affects all of the funding and all the policy making in the United States and Canada and affects some other countries overseas. The advisory committee actually stated that they wanted to have the effect on the environment and natural resources placed into the dietary guidelines, which is really what you're saying. That's how you make this, what Steve's asking, and that's what you're stating about the word realizing. So, but it was turned down. It was this, anything scientific was laid to rest because of the Trump administration. Essentially, he silenced the scientific advisory committee, and they weren't allowed to place anything like that in the guidelines. But that's what's needed. We need it back on the table. We need policymakers to put it in front of educators so that students have that awareness. And then I think it has to be somewhere along the way on the food itself. Everything that they purchase, the diner that they're talking about, that Steve was talking about, I think that they need to come out and they need to say, this came from a depleted source of such and such. And sooner or later, we're going to have, I think, instead of just an awareness, I think there has to be a monetary value associated. It's very difficult to do that, obviously, if not impossible. But there are ways. It starts with education, it starts with policymaking, it starts with our dietary guidelines, and it starts with those things that govern that family that Stephen's talking about in terms of how do you make them realize it. And then, like I said, get a documentary like Cowspiracy right in the parents' hands somehow, and then they'll have a better understanding. Then that'll make them realize what's occurring, and maybe stop doing it until policies are enacted that are incentivize and or penalize for the use of natural resources, climate change or otherwise.
Yeah, also, I mean, Richard makes a really great point about education and how we need to bring out the truth about what we are doing so that it's easy for people to connect their actions with the consequences of those actions. And, there's a new documentary that's coming out called They're Trying to Kill Us, which basically points out the fundamental social injustice in the animal agriculture system and how people of color are targeted to become vehicles for the pharmaceutical industry to make money off their bodies. So it is, think about the Biden administration promoting dairy in schools starting in August of 2021. And you ask, which planet is this guy living on? Because this is August of 2021, he's initiating a new Discover Dairy program in schools when we know that dairy is something that people of color cannot even digest properly, okay? And it's tremendously destructive to the environment. And yet he wants to be an environment president, but see, there are so many pressures that are put on him and the administration to maintain and to grow the current system, whatever the current system is. So this is why we wind up doing absurd things, because once an industry establishes itself, it doesn't want to let go. It wants to keep growing. That's the system we have today. It's like a Ponzi scheme, and everyone wants to be, growing in the Ponzi scheme, right? So we do animal experimentation in labs, in universities, even though we know that that's not doing us any good. It's not giving us any new ideas. But we continue that because there's an entire animal experimentation industry that's making money off of the animals. So we continue doing silly things because of the system that we are stuck in. So it's like you're like a rat on a treadmill, hamster on a treadmill, like that. And because it's systemic, right? So we really need to free ourselves from this system. This is why I say that we are all being factory farmed. Humans are also being factory farmed in the system. And it's about stepping out of that, observing the factory farm, and then helping people free themselves from the factory farm and creating a new system that does not require us to be in a treadmill, that takes care of basic needs for humanity so that we each can contribute in our best way towards making this planet better. Because just like, Dr. Oppenlander pointed out, we can, when we have the ability to change the climate of the planet, we can change it for the good or for the better. Right? Better or for worse. So we have to choose to do it for the better, collectively. And it cannot be done on an individual basis. We try, but ultimately we have to create that new system that allows us to do it collectively.